Oh, excellent.
I don't know that it will in time. We could be here all day. I drew up the week schedule before I knew that it would be this long of a patch.
How massive of a patch? Because this is the first one, right?
The first one. That's why I wanted to catch it. I was like, if they surprise me, I want to be there day and date. So
yeah,
I won't make the same mistake with 10.1. I will schedule 10.1 for that Wednesday.
Yeah, any like the ETA on the patch? Like,
it's
interesting because I'm used to. Oh, it'll be up at 5?
Yeah. Yeah, it's down from like 8 to 5.
Okay.
It's like a whole day.
Whole day patch.
Whole day. Guild Wars just rolls that stuff out, and you just play on an old version of the server until it's ready, and then you get told, and it just refreshes. And they just roll everybody over.
Mm-hmm.
They just squeeze you like you're in a toothpaste tube, and people just get pushed over to the patch.
Oh, man. What's your pivot then? You what are you talking about then?
We're keeping an eye on the Ultimate Race.
Yeah.
And
how's that going?
We took a look at an Asmon video about WoW versus 14 bosses being easy. And we looked at Bellular going over the sub numbers. So it's been a good day. We're still talking about WoW. I planned for a WoW day, and I got a bunch of stuff going.
How are the sub numbers for WoW looking like? Because that is probably going to bleed directly into what we're going to talk about here today.
They're still lower than Shadowlands by most estimations on launch, so at the same point in the life cycle. But they look to be moving in a positive direction. All evidence looks like the people who started Dragonflight, that they are gaining players faster than they're losing them. So Dragonflight seems to be gaining steam. There are a lot of people who tried it that have already left, so they're not retaining everybody.
They've done the content, and they'll say, "I'll see you in 2 years," they've done
the content. They've decided it's boring, or people who liked certain elements of past expansions and Dragonflight doesn't hit it for them, and so they were like, "Well, I tried it; it still isn't for me."
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would love to it. Just like playing 14, I'd love to go into like Extreme or Savage. That's kind of the next thing that I really want to work on, or PvP, and a lot of that has overlap with people that want to go either watch or dabble in Ultimate today. So it's a good day to go let those people have their fun and play something else.
The question ends up being then, the question that I then have for you in terms of that is, how's your PvP going? I saw that you were just rocking and rolling PvP. How do you feel about it? What's your current rank? How far have you been able to? Bronze, still in bronze?
Bronze. I went on a huge win streak yesterday. Got all the way to the top of bronze 1, and then it just plummets away.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at MMO PvP, but I enjoy it.
Right.
I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I got the mount. I got the Allegan watermelon.
Congrats on your watermelon.
Yeah, I got a watermelon. So good to get that out of the way this early in the season.
Mm-hmm.
Last season, the last couple seasons, I'm like, I'll chip away at it over the season, and then I don't. I didn't make it to rank 25 either of the last 2 seasons. So this time I'm already ranked 15. The season's barely started. We're a couple weeks in, and so hopefully I can get to rank 25 like before the half patch, and then that way it's like, don't even worry about it. Just the second half of because the half patch is going to come with all this other stuff. And I'm going to want to go focus on, hopefully the new relic grind is really intriguing. I've seen a lot of people really frustrated at knowing for a fact there's not an exploratory zone.
Yeah.
And so like, I'm really hopeful that the relic grind is still going to surprise us. I don't know how. Yeah. We know like the one thing that there are people that want, we know that's not going to be it. There's also people that didn't like the exploratory zones. So like, it'd be nice if they could somehow magically find something we all wanted, but that's not possible. So I'm just interested to see what the half patch brings us. I'm hoping it's not just questing and tomestones, because that's all we've seen so far. But that's the first step. Like the first step is always really lackluster. It's always just kind of set the scene. Pride and Chat got all the first step relics within 10 days, which is just preposterous.
Well, Pride is a effing legend. Like when let's set context in case anybody's just like randomly watching that as a clip or whatever. Like yeah, like you tell me Pride did that, I'm going like, yeah, that checks out. Like, okay,
Yeah, they're number like 29 in the world on
right,
all achievements for total achievements in
yeah.
14. So
Tip of the hat, the legend continues. Yeah, as opposed to like if you told me like they were like, nope, they they deleted the character, they did it again. In fact, I think they've done that multiple
my
times.
experience is that people that are that efficient are also that efficient in other games. So I think Pride is ranked above me in WoW too, and doesn't really play just because like people who play that efficiently do that everywhere. So I think there's this idea that like to be that high, you have to be a no lifer, and it's not. You just have to
No.
improve at how you play.
Yeah,
That's what it is. So
like maximize,
if you,
because like it's here's always the challenge, right? Because like one of the things is that I recognize that there is a fun in finding efficiency. I know there's a lot of players who run into, especially games as a service, the thing that can catch a lot of players is that they lose the fun over efficiency. So like all you can have fun being efficient.
yes,
Efficiency can be fun, but sometimes like you can also run into an issue of like I'm not having fun, but I'm being really efficient, and then that ends up kind of destroying the overall relationship. So there's always going to be that ebb and flow in these style of games. And so I know like for me, like one of the things I have to really balance in life is just because people like I have limited playtime. I have this is what I usually get budgeted and it gets scheduled, and I tend to you know try to find the fun over the efficiency, but the content creator side of it does mean that occasionally it is good to be able to do these things, but I end up just always having to kind of chip away things. And over time, just like you, just like me, just like people will look at it and be like, how have you done all of this stuff? It's like, well, I mean, when you take it over the course of 10 years, like it's actually very manageable to do those things. I did not do it all within the first couple of months, and I won't be and that's just the reality of where I am in life, and that will change. But yeah, like when it comes down to it, I think the thing I'm most excited about is that when we were talking about our schedule change for streaming and going in February,
yep,
but March they announced the date for the Destiny raid, which goes live on the 10th, which is like the
yeah.
Friday. The 11th is when I'm scheduled to do the stream. So we're going to be jumping into the Destiny 2 Lightfall raid like basically day one, not competition mode, but still like. So if you guys out there are interested in doing the Lightfall raid, be sure to get into the Discord because I'm doing it. Like I love the raids in Destiny. Ironically enough, I've done all of them except for the Witch Queens. So maybe we'll run some Witch Queen raid over the course of February just to kind of say goodbye to the kind of the Witch Queen and jump into Lightfall. So if you guys are interested, be sure to be a part of that because that's what's going down. All right. Anything else going on? Anything are there any kind of fun developments? I'm hearing a lot of people trying to dunk on Forspoken, but the PC version should just actually now be being activated. So I'll have to give you guys
people. I saw a lot of people on Twitter last night mocking the low Metacritic score, but my understanding is no review copies went out. So the Metacritic score was fueled by hate reviews. Like they didn't have the game.
Well, there are reviews that went out for the PS5. So one of the things is that there's like any user score like last night, like that's
they're just hating the game because they couldn't have possibly spent any meaningful amount of time with it.
Right.
So they were ready to put their review up moment one.
Right.
So like I was seeing a lot of this like hate bombing, but like none of that matters. I don't know. And it's the same with the other direction, right? They've already decided it's the greatest game of all time, and like Starfield's already the greatest game of all time, and it hasn't released. I've seen people arguing that Starfield's going to be amazing, and Starfield or whatever it's called, and like all I've seen is like like a tire driving across some sand. There was a touch of gameplay. Like it's very, very little.
Yeah.
So day one, just go have fun in games. I saw Rory Khan saying like, yeah, I mean, there's some areas that like it could definitely be better, but like there's some elements about it that he's really liking. That's what I would expect from a day one experience.
Yeah.
Hey, also, I can already see some flaws because it's a game and it's day one, but it is what it is. But like, also, I am having fun playing a video game.
I think that's also coming down into like in my worldview, like I ran into an issue I know when I was in college where I became a review snob. Like if it wasn't a 9 or higher, then it wasn't worth my time. Also in college, I didn't have lots of expendable money. I had lots of time, but it was like, life has changed. Now I have money that I can spend on games, but not a lot of time to play them. But I think Forspoken, I'm really looking forward to going hands on with it. I really am looking forward to the PC version for the features that it has. And honestly, I could give two craps about what somebody thinks about a game, unless I was like, there's a few reviewers out, reviewers out there that I feel I align with very closely. And those are the reviewers that I actually really care about. Like when it comes down to the score stuff and like console war stuff, it's like, I think that's just a game for people who have time to complain about things on the internet, as opposed to like, okay, well,
I think in general, like as the day rolls on and as the weeks roll on, we'll see Forspoken just end up with one of those mixed review games.
Yeah.
There will be people that have negative elements. There'll be people that have positive. I don't think from here it gets to be a game that's all positive. I don't think it's in contention for game of the year. But I do think that like the negative reviews will get washed out and you'll see the vast majority will fall somewhere. And I had some fun. There were things I wish were different. And depending on how they value games, they may have been perfectly fine with all of that for the $70 price point. I think the price point really stings, but we've been paying $60 for games for like 20 years. So at some point this had to happen where games started creeping to 65 and 70 on the reg. Like that had to happen.
What's the real issue and concern that I have, especially when it comes down to Forspoken specifically, and Andrew in chat and Twitch chat's very clear about it, feeling that Forspoken has the potential to lose Square Enix a lot of money. And even if it doesn't lose money, we've seen Square Enix come out in statements for games that generally we would feel sell very well, but still under the expectations that are being set for them in that regard. So from what I've seen, like I've seen a couple of things. One person trying to meme on like a line of dialogue is like, this was an actual line of dialogue, and that's going around on Twitter. And I watched the clip and I thought it was actually funny. I thought the voice acting and the playfulness between Cuff and I don't know yet the main character's name, Frey. Like I haven't played it yet. I've just been following it, so it's not all ingrained in the brain. Like I was like, that actually is great. I thought the acting was great in it. Like it sounded really. I was like, I can't wait to see what else is there. Hell, I mean, again, like my perspective, I enjoyed Destiny 1, and that wizard, came from the moon, and so like I'm not gonna sit here and worry about it that much. But it's like, okay.
Anything in sarcastic Twitter voice, it's all jerky. Like at the beginning of Dragonflight, the flight master would tell you how long was waiting, and the text on it said, "The Zeppelin will be here, or it won't. Let's wait and see." And like, and that's a playfulness on the fact that like expansions are buggy, and so when the Zeppelin bugged out, now that we've read the dev blog on like how that played out, step one was shut the Zeppelins off, stop the problem. So they stopped the problem. So then the Zeppelin just stopped showing up. And like that still makes that line of dialogue true. And then they activated the portal. Well, the reason they didn't activate the portal in the first place is they said that if the portal fails, people are going to click it once. Once it fails, they're going to click it over and over and over and over. And our servers are going to get overwhelmed with requests that are never going to go through but players will just keep spamming. So they activate the portal. Players do what players do. They have to deactivate the portal. And now there's no way to get to the Dragon Isles. And so like having that line of dialogue aware, like, hey, we don't know what the day one problem is going to be, but day one problems are real. The Zeppelin will be here, or it won't. Like, and like there was some humor in it that like, yeah, like, I don't know.
Chaos Rider, oh my gosh, gifted out 5 subs over on Twitch. Thank you so much for that support. you freaking legend. And we guys, we appreciate you guys, especially in the month of January, as kind of a PSA, whether it's with Work to Game or any other content creator on Twitch. If you have Amazon Prime, you have free Bezos bucks that you can go give to anybody on the Twitch platform.
Man, go get these Raiders. Pay for part of their lunch.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big difference. The ad for those of you on Twitch who've been enjoying and relying on that ad revenue incentive and goal have now felt what YouTubers feel every January. And so as a just a reminder, if you guys didn't see our last video, etc., Chris will be on his little vacation going skiing next week. So just note that you'll see a lessening of the streams
Saturday morning.
I
get in my car by myself. I get on the open road. I did it for the first time last year, and I really enjoyed it. I hadn't done that much time alone in a long time.
Yeah.
And I really liked it. I mean, I don't know. I got my podcasts and my books on tape, and I just drove to Colorado. Like last year I drove to Colorado, and then with a friend we drove over to Utah together. was really great.
Colorado is always a surprising longer drive than I ever anticipate. Like I always feel like, I don't know, because it's a straight shot up north from Texas, and I always forget about Kansas. Oh yeah, there's a whole other state between Oklahoma and Colorado. So I always go like, man, yeah, that's not a bad drive until you make the drive, and then you're like, that was brutal. Like that was a hard ride. Even when I was like young, I was just like, all right, I'm gonna go up there on my own. I'll see you guys there. Oh my gosh, yeah.
I'll make it in a single shot. One straight through. So, you don't make much from ad revenue when you stream on Twitch, but comparing a 3-hour stream in December to one now, it's a 90% drop in ad revenue.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It checks out.
So what will happen? So the problem is, it's not just that it's the lowest point all year. It's that November, December are the highest points all year, and they're back to back.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a summer bump, but like what it ends up being is you have this incredible ad revenue in November, January, or December, because what they're doing is they're spending all their January, February money in November, December. So you're getting double paid. And so if you've ever worked in an hourly job, I did overnight security while I was in college. There would be these days of the year, these specific time windows that were eligible for like 2.5 times pay. And I would work these like 8 or 12 or 16-hour shifts. Anything they would give me, just nom, 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 nom. I want all the hours I can get, because you're getting double paid. So like, why would you not work? Like that's such a bargain, because for every hour you're there, like this hour sucks. This hour didn't suck twice. It only sucked once. And I got paid for 2. That was such a bargain. But the alternative is January, February. They're like, I guess we'll pay you. How about for every hour you spend here, I'll pay you for like 10 minutes. How many hours are you going to go to work, guys? Like, I'm sure many of you have very rewarding jobs. I hope you feel immensely proud of what you do and that you grow in them and that you succeed. But how many of you would work extra if they offered you 10 cents on the dollar? That's a great time of year to go, you know what? I just realized I'm going to take my dog for a walk. Like that's way better. It's way better than 10 cents on the dollar.
Oh man, yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see 2023, because this will be the kind of the first full year of that program and kind of how that shakes out. Because one of the running and prevalent theories that you kind of see is that YouTube continues not to offer the tools and the features that you see on Twitch.
Shorts revenue starts like tomorrow. Maybe fine. They're getting there.
Well, that's shorts. That's not live streaming, right? So like I'm talking.
The shorts pay is weird. The shorts pay.
Oh man,
that dude, model. It's a weird. Like if any of you have ever like sold pretzels for a pyramid scheme or whatever, you're like, so you got to like do the thing and then they look at the total profitability, and then based on the average saltiness of the entire pyramid, that determines how much my pretzels were worth. And it's like, I don't know what's happening here. And at the end, they're like, and your check is $6. Is that right to you?
Is that good?
Like, I don't know. Is it $6?
That was 60 million views.
I don't actually understand. So I will say shorts creators are just going to have to be like, it's not negotiable. So just take the number and just move on with your life. Because like, it's not like you can complain. Yeah. It's, like, I don't know. Is the amount of gas that comes out of the gas pump a gallon? Probably. But like, I can't go into the guy and be like, hey, I think I didn't get a full gallon. I need some gas. Like, no, you put the money in the pump. It gave you some gas. It's most likely right.
It's an interesting vertical in terms of like content creation. Cause right now it's a loss leader. Like when it comes down to shorts? Content, the time it makes to make the short,
They just don't want TikTok taking them over,
right? And so like I get that mindset. I just would love to see them continue to invest in their live streaming features, because like when it comes down to a 1-to-1, like it's Twitch is the better live streaming experience hands down, and from a moderation tools, from a just an experience, a chat experience.
Yes.
Now, and they keep saying like, yeah, all that's coming to life. I honestly think they were working on that, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, this TikTok thing might get shut down, or TikTok's actually eating our lunch. Let's go ahead and make sure we have that as a product. So I like, from a backlog refinement and what the company's doing, like I'm glad shorts exist, but I'm really curious to see how shorts change and impact come February 1st, where all of a sudden, because like we like from a cost to average perspective, there's no value in us doing the short except for the fact that YouTube wants people posting shorts, and it's like, okay, well, we're kind of losing out because we're not. All right, so we better do that. And then it's like, all right, like I don't know if this is good. It got a crazy amount of views, but how much did it make? Nothing. Like, okay, any subs? A couple.
We're eligible for revenue on shorts already.
Yeah.
I checked one the other day. I checked one the other day. It crushed, and we got like 3 pennies. It was awesome.
Right, we did. But that's through the shorts fund. On February 1st,
oh, this is the big boy. Yeah.
Get part of the partner aspect. Right. And so I'm wondering if you see like, that ends up becoming something a little bit more sustainable, a little bit more viable. Because, like as much as I've seen a handful of people complain about them, but for the 5 or 6 people who are like, I really don't like shorts, like I'm like, that thing got 30,000 views, like, and like 200 likes. Somebody cares. Like there's somebody out there. There's a vertical market out there for it. So it is what it is in that regards. But it'll be interesting to see what happens in that regards. But yeah, I would love to see a YouTube step up, because when it comes down to Twitch, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, Twitch is dead. It's like, I think they're going to try to push it in terms of how many ads they can run, and they're going to get some real data in terms of like what ends up making the most sense. But people are going to go over to YouTube and realize you don't really have the tools that you're kind of used to, that in almost way are benefit the viewer outside of being annoyed.
I bet it's 6 to 8 minutes. I bet 6 to 8 minutes out of the hour.
That's a radio program.
A tenth to yep. Yeah, I bet they're competing with radio. That's where I think it falls.
Yeah.
I think it's radio. It's not TV. TV's more. It's not TV.
Oh man.
Because TV pauses the show when you're away. Live sports don't, but you have announcers for that. So like TV, it's not TV, and YouTube more competes with TV. And so they get to run more ads per hour of viewing. But it's also not like theater where there's no interruptions and there's these intermissions. It costs more than that to host. So I think it's competing with radio.
Yeah.
Burden.
And the way I view and have viewed the shorts, because I see like Blummy talking about, like sometimes like you have the attention span, you don't want to, like the shorts are just these little bite-sized chunks. I view a short as like an advertisement for your content. Like it's like, how do we like promote? Like this is normally what we make, but this is condensed because from a kind of a handshake perspective, like, hey, like how do I make, instead of having an ad that's like, go watch Work the Game, it's like, oh, let me just take some really great content and condense it. And, maybe somebody was like, oh, that was
all about cheese.
All about cheese.
Final Fantasy.
Yeah. Did you ever make the short about like how you suck that guy off?
No, it's somewhere on clips.
All right, well, I'll go find a clip and I'll put it on the Work the Game.
The guy off.
Yeah, and you did. Yeah.
So I was like, that clip. She's like, "Why do you keep saying it?"
That's so funny. Stop saying it. See, I was crying. I was like, "You got to make that a short," and then you didn't. So I'll go make it a short for Work the Game. I'll go find that clip and get that up there, so you guys can see how Chris sucked that guy off. Truly a moment. Truly a great moment. All right. Do we want to jump into kind of our main topic for the show?
Yes.
In a perfect transition, because we are consummate professionals. What is a healthy lifespan for an MMO population trend? Should it impact feedback ingestion? Chris, do you want to jump us through the first paragraph?
Yeah, when you look at MMORPG population metrics, one thing you notice is that for new releases of MMORPGs or new releases of content for pre-existing MMORPGs, they have huge population spikes. These spikes usually last 1 to 3 months, depending on the MMORPG and the scope of the content, then drop off again. A recent example that has concrete evidence is New World. The Brimstone patch release didn't see a huge jump, but the Fresh Start did. However, we're nearing the 2.5-month marker since Fresh Start. The population in New World has already dropped to what it was before Brimstone release. Along with this, there's interesting patterns that you see are with feedback around these times. Typically during the hype spikes, the feedback is overall very positive. Game is saved. Things like, I remember creating a post criticizing Brimstone and having a negative outlook on the game. And I don't think Brimstone changed the issues. I was downvoted heavily with a lot of people are waiting for Fresh Start and similar statements. Now that the population has dropped off to what it was before then, does that mean one of us was right and the other is wrong? Or are people playing MMORPGs for 2.5 months a healthy behavior? So all these trends I'm seeing, it's raised a few questions. So first of all, what do you think, Brian?
So I think that actually ends up being a healthy behavior. I think one of the things, the biggest misconception in the MMORPG is that it's like you need people playing it constantly, especially in the more modern, nature in which that revenue is generated outside of the subscription fee model, where essentially like in the older model, that's where you kind of saw the sandbox more or less thrive. But if we're actually going to look and compare numbers to numbers, like the sandbox model compared to the theme park clearly has that design. And what you see has evolved from that within the theme park design is the ability for people to catch up, because they recognize if the goals keep getting higher and higher, at some point you end up making it a disincentive for people to kind of jump back in. So roughly speaking, when you start thinking about how much time you end up spending with your average game, I would say 2.5 months out of a given year is a lot of time to play a game. And like that's going to vary by the individual, but you could kind of almost estimate, like if you're thinking about playing, roughly 8 hours, like if we start to kind of, I'm put my numbers on it, even though like while I'm definitely a passion gamer, I do have a lot of responsibilities. So the roughly the estimates that I've seen with COVID numbers in play is that the average gamer plays 8.3 hours per week. I always factor it up a little bit more for MMOs. I always kind of give MMOs players like 12, where before it was 7.1 hours per week before COVID. And then essentially I was kind of giving MMO players like 10. So if like you think about that average, if you're thinking about that, that's more than 40 hours a month. That's more than 80 hours to 100 hours of gameplay, which is roughly right in line with what the content offering of these MMORPGs actually truly deliver. And then what they do is they give you all this additional optional content that you can choose to engage with if you want, but it is not required. And it's the fact that there probably is not a subscription fee, and you don't have to go sit here and grind out all these extra things just to be competitive or just to be a part of it. And so what you end up seeing is that and this is what I call kind of Yoshi P's real model: deliver content and then also allow people to take breaks from that content, so that however long that break is, they're always willing. They already own the game. The barrier for entry to get back into it ends up being rather low, and so they can kind of come back and check in from time to time. What I see is, and what I'd love to get your perspective on, because I see this comment come up a lot, is that a lot of people are craving the MMO that to consume them for like 10 years, like where this is the only game that I'm going to play. This is the world I'm going to live in. This is the community that I'm going to be a part of. This is the only thing I'm going to be living in. And I don't think that the games that are coming out can deliver on that, especially with how the internet, social media, and content creation solves the MMO, solves the these things, and the discussions go. What do you think about anything I just said?
Yeah, I think that the healthy cycle is to be able to take breaks. I think to view a game more seasonally and say, you know what, in the summer, I have all these things going on in my life, and this is the game that I'm going to pair with that, and so on, and rotate throughout the year. And maybe for you, that's the different seasons of one game. I mean, there is a different seasonal element to the 0.3 patch. Feels drastically different in Final Fantasy 14 than a 0.0 patch. They just feel different. And so even if you just choose to re-up within the same game, it still changes. And that allows them to kind of morph that with these patch updates, either to an existing MMO or for new MMOs. I think having them develop blindly with no feedback more than 100, 200 hours of content for an individual player, what are the odds they get it right? What are the odds that player then consumes that at the right pace, that it feels healthy and they don't feel overwhelmed at any point, but they don't feel like it's hopeless at any point, and alternatively, they don't feel like they have to binge it. And so slow releasing it in these kind of like 80 to 200 hour type sprints, I think has worked really well for games and has made it feel like you're getting like a new game within a game, rather than dropping like 1,000 hours at once. Picking up a new existing MMO can be incredibly overwhelming because you are getting that. You're getting thousands of hours all at once, and it's too much. And so these new player experiences are a lot of times about shortening that curve to get you back into something reasonably healthy. Otherwise, it still feels very overwhelming. That's the problem that Final Fantasy is struggling with for new players, is that they hit you with this number that doesn't wear off. They hit you with a lot more than 2.5 months worth of content for the typical player for a new player. They have a ton to get through. And the ones that want that, it's this joyous moment because very few games offer it. But the ones that don't, it's not optional. And so it can be incredibly overwhelming. So I think that that naturally means that the hype cycles follow that. We're all in the same state of new and exciting, old and worn out. What game are you even talking about? Oh my God, it's coming again. And then we ride it all over again. Where the second half of this gets into is I went out and criticized it day and date. And so this is a little like saying, okay, well, the average marriage has low points. Say we have some data set that says year 7 is always a little bit rough on people. And so I went out on somebody's wedding day and said, year 7 sucks, huh? And then people downvoted me. Like people said, dude, you shouldn't say that on the wedding day. Am I wrong? And so I do take the second half as like, you're a little ahead of the curve. Your feelings are valid that you think, it's hopeless because Brimstone didn't fix your issues with New World day and date on the day of patch. But why don't you just let people have their fun who are having fun on Brimstone? And then you can say that, don't worry, Brimstone newness will wear off. They'll all get there. And then you guys can all complain together on that back half. Because I do see people saying like, oh my gosh, Final Fantasy is the game for me. I could never picture playing another game. And then you say, man, I'm playing Guild Wars right now. And they're like, why? Final Fantasy is so much better. And then that very same person puts out a video or a Reddit post or whatever now. And they're like, I'm trying Guild Wars for the first time. It's amazing. And you're like, well, am I right? Because I said it then? Well, you're both right. Like they were enjoying Final Fantasy when it was new. And now they're enjoying Guild Wars. And that is the correct way to play. Enjoy this, enjoy this. That's the correct way. You jumped to Guild Wars early, and now you were enjoying Guild Wars then, and maybe now you're enjoying New World. That's also the correct way to play. The correct way to play is to play the way that's fun for you. So I wouldn't worry too much about who is right and who is wrong in that context of like, my opinion over time became more correct, unless you're somebody that's putting out like predictions and you're like, okay, and I've written those in stone and we're going to go back and check in. I would say you had an opinion then, you have an opinion now. Your opinion may change. It may stay the same. Either way, it was still a valid opinion day and date on Brimstone for you not to like the game, the very same way it was day and date okay for those other people to be super freaking excited about the upcoming fresh start servers. Those are both really valid because what we're talking about here is feelings. They didn't say like, I thought that player numbers would just drop again, and they said I was wrong, and it turned out I was right. That would be an objective fact, but that's not what was said here. What was said here is I criticize something. That's a feeling. Feedback is mostly feelings, and so it is really fickle.
Well, and these games have the ability to invoke that feeling, that connection, and that's why I like the MMO specifically. It's not just a game; it's a service. It's also a community. It has all these extra elements into it, and so the wanting to defend it, the wanting to be connected with it, the wanting to see it continue. Man, my voice keeps failing. Continue on. Oh, geez, Louise, is important, but that's where, like, when it comes down to, like, everything kind of gets back into numbers because those numbers represent kind of the ideal of fear, because it's like, I want to maybe spend more time with it, but am I wasting my time? Is my investment in my character, are they at some point going to go away? Like all these other games have failed. And the other thing that even the Screw brings up is that we also have a ton more option nowadays. One of the things we talked about in talking about Josh's video about how games have devolved and the industry is just only gotten worse. It's like, no, there's so many more options. There's a lot of things that are requesting your attention, where before you had like 2 or 3 to choose from. So the people who were interested in that kind of game didn't have 30 options, and thus the pool of people were lessened. It was now it's like, okay, yeah, you could go play Final Fantasy, or you could go play WoW, or you could play New World, or you could play Guild Wars, or you can play ESO, or you could then go down a rabbit hole of these other, MMOs that are kind of just out there, but they're not necessarily driving in a huge chunk of traffic. Things like Warframe, or things like, why am I drawing a blank on it's that Path of Exile. That's the one I was thinking of. And so there's just many, many, many more options outside of single player games, outside of, in a way, MMO lights, like when you start thinking about it, or to kind of add on to that, Game Pass and PlayStation, Plus offering for the same price, you would kind of assume would be your subscription to an MMO, countless additional games, new games, games that are coming in and changing. And there's plenty of things to be distracted by. And in my mind, when it comes down to it, wherever you put your money and for as long as you're having fun, you're doing it right, Now, the article or the post here continues to go on and says, talk about a few questions. And they say, first, what do you think is a healthy lifespan for an MMORPG release, population trend? And when is that content that is being released for pre-existing MMORPGs? Should you see these population spikes only lasting 1 to 3 months? Or is the healthy thing for these things to last much longer? So what do you think? Because like we kind of brought up 2.5, roughly about 3 months. How does that make you feel in terms of the content?
I think anything between like a 2 and 5 month trend is healthy depending on the game, because you have all those secondary things. How many of there are those? How many of those are worth doing? Things like raid progression, things like slow grinding achievements, things like that. You want people that want to do those to feel like they have time, and if you have built into your game that you want your player base to take breaks, you want them to finish your content and take the break just in time to come back for your next content push. You don't want them to be on break and no intention of coming back when you drop your next patch. So I think it's going to vary game to game, as far as when those spikes happen and how big those spikes are compared to the non-spikes. I think that's perfectly healthy. I think it's fine. I think this idea that we're going to have it dialed to 11 all the time is insane. Like you can't live like that. It's nice to have some lulls. It feels better than if like every moment is this epic big quest. Like at some point, I'm just going to go do something else. The winter break in TV shows, you can't wait for it to come back, but it also gives you a second to like do other things. And you don't feel like, oh, it's just taking up, like I didn't want to watch it this week, but I don't want to be behind. So I think it's really nice. As far as like lifespan, like how often should they do big content releases? Obviously the every other year model has been quite good. That's given them enough time to develop something that big, but not so much time that you end up kind of
forgetting about
out. And so we see, Guild Wars has, whether or not it was intentionally experimented with having a longer cycle between expansions. And the game kind of falls into oblivion where people are like, what's Guild Wars? Is that game still around? And like it was still around. It was still healthy. It still had a player base, but it ended up kind of being forgotten because there was no big press releases. But on the other hand, I think annualized franchises, things like Call of Duty and FIFA, can start to feel a little bit like vultures, a little bit like, didn't I just give you money? And so I think somewhere around that 2.5 year cycle also feels really healthy. So maybe anything that's a multiple of 2.5 is healthy. I don't know.
Yeah, when it comes out, like I think essentially that time frame is also be coupled with that level of that spike, right? So if you see that spike usually is encompassing content, why you'll hear us continue to say content is king. And I think honestly, like 3 months is, I think, really healthy because you can divide a year up into 4 seasons, each lasting 3 months. And if you kind of have that cycle, it gives you the option to jump in and jump out. And what we're seeing is that you kind of end up having kind of a category of, like Chris brought up, the once every 2 years. That's the 14 and WoW model. But then you also have the every year model like ESO and Destiny and and in a way, New World maybe, because we saw a big update with the Brimstone Sands, and they're already teasing a big update this year, and we don't know what that actually entails. Is that an expansion, like a massive update? Once this year is done, we'll have a much better picture of what we think AGS and New World will do. And it could be that New World's on a 2-year cycle where every year ends up being kind of a big moment once a year with the other seasonal content. And then every 2 years is the big, is that big milestone achievement. But we can only speculate on what they're doing there. But at least, if nothing else, if you're checking in and you're having a touch point with that game once to every 2 years, that seems generally, I think, very valuable. And I think the business model then is about, well, for those of you who are not dipping out, because when we start talking about it in terms of percentages, you would say that 10, 80, 10, like you have the bottom 10 is the people who hate you and they're never going to care for you, but they're going to let you know that they don't like you, whether they've, experienced it or not. 80% is just general gamers. Like, oh, what are people talking about? What's going on? What's exciting? I'm going to jump into whatever the big conversation piece is, just like you would with a TV show. You're just kind of like going along with whatever's being advertised to you in a way. And that's not a bad thing. That's the vast majority of gaming. And then you have the top 10%, which is the diehard, like, I'm never leaving this game. I'm sticking with it and playing it all the time. And, I'm advocating for it, et cetera. And so you end up having like the vast majority of people are going to dip in, dip out, dip in. And it's all about how you invite them through marketing and honestly, at the end of the day, through content. So if your business model is sustainable, like if you are able to keep the lights on, keep the servers on, keep the devs on with that model, you've got to find model that works. Keep doing what you're doing. And I think everybody will be all the better for it, because you can end up having kind of, that hopefully developing a fun vision for the game itself. Now, second, they ask, does this mean during these short spurts of the population spikes that last 1 to 3 months, feedback that is submitted should be taken differently? This is something interesting. Specifically, blind praise. This is the blind defense from, oh, this game's perfect. You're in a hype cycle. It's that honeymoon phase. So essentially, if you're seeing that kind of people that praising the game and claiming that it's safe, should that actually be taken with a grain of salt? There is also a high chance that players won't be around in 1 to 3 months. Or on the flip side, if someone's being overly critical, should they be taken with less sincerity, as they are not essentially a stable, loyal audience? What do you think about that question?
I do think context matters. The grain of salt thing doesn't make sense, because I will tell you that if a game launches like Forspoken is right now, and there are negative views on day one, that also is indicative of a problem. Like, it should be an exciting day, right? And so if you see, so they use the honeymoon phase, I used the relationship analogy earlier. If you see a couple bickering on their wedding day and they're at each other's throats and their families talking trash about the other one the whole time, that's a bad sign, more so than if that happens in year 7, because that's an easy day. It's an easy win. Any of you who have been married and had the chance to take a honeymoon, my wife and I took our honeymoon immediately after being married, and I spent basically all the money I had to find a deal on an all exclusive, all included or whatever. Didn't turn out everything was. Trip in Belize. And so we were off in Belize, sitting there drinking Mai Tais on a beach. It was really easy to be married. Super easy. If the whole thing had just been Mai Tais on a beach and a private hut to ourselves, it would have been really easy to stay married the whole time. That was great. That's not reality, but it was a really great time. And what that means is that if there were cracks showing then, that would have been wildly problematic. If we had been like, God, I'm so bummed she's here, that would have been a problem. That would have been a huge problem. Perfect. And so the blind praise is valuable because the blind praise is there. It's deserved. Everything up to that point, we dated for a while. We were engaged for a while. We had this huge celebration, and then we were on this honeymoon. All that blind praise was earned through that entire process, and it's very valid, and it's deserving. Being proud of a developer the day they give us content, yeah, that's the day to tell them thank you. So if somebody brings you a Christmas gift or a birthday gift, and your response is, well, 5 months ago, you borrowed something of mine, didn't give it back. Not the right moment, man. Like, just say thank you. Like, can we just be happy in this moment where we're exchanging gifts or cards or whatever? And then we can go back to bickering about who owes who $5 later. Like, right now, let's just enjoy this moment for what it is. And I think that's very valid. And that honeymoon phase is earned. That's something that, like, Dragonflight launch should be exciting. And if there are problems with Dragonflight launch, that's alarming, because this should be the honeymoon phase. The other side of it is that if somebody is being critical, there is an idea in game dev that if somebody really just didn't like you and didn't think the game could be good or saved, they would just leave. There's no point in telling you. There's no point in complaining. You're not going to get better. I went to a different grocery store than I normally went to this week. I bought a bag of avocados. They looked like to be reasonably priced. They were all really ready to go, like super ripe, very soft. I was going to make them into what we call avocado pasta very quickly, within a couple days. So I grabbed this bag and I got up there, and the barcode is on each individual avocado. And the freaking cashier grabs the bag and is just flopping it on the thing until it scans. I will not be going back to that grocery store, but I didn't take the time to complain. I didn't pull a manager. I actually out loud, I said, come on, dude. And he didn't even look up. I just stared at him. I was like, are you being serious? Like, is he messing with me? I won't go back to that grocery store. Why would I go somewhere? I'm trying to eat healthier. Produce is going to be part of that. If you're going to just take my produce that I carefully selected for the right ripeness for me, and you're just going to bash the hell out of it every time I make it to the register, I'm not going to buy groceries from you. It's not worth complaining, because I don't care if you get better. I'll just shop somewhere else. So the fact that somebody's taking the time to log out of the game, log on to the forums, verify their account, whatever, go to the right post, this is how I'm feeling, says, I believe you can get better. If Brian had bruised my avocados, I would have said, Brian,
the hell, dude?
What the hell, dude? And we would have had a conversation. Can you be more careful with my produce in the future?
Can you also replace my avocados?
And you would have said, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about the fact that avocados are fragile. My bad. And there would have been an investment there because I want this to get better. And so if somebody is complaining, they are part of the loyal audience. That doesn't mean they should complain on day one. Like, unless it's, hey, the servers are down on day one, but just like, hey, it's day one. How come the combat's not perfectly balanced? I can't believe this is a trash game. Yeah, give it a second, man. It's got to go to space and back. Can you just give it a second?
Yeah, I want to always like encourage feedback, and the thing is that just as the only thing you can control is yourself, right? Like, I cannot sit here and control like your emotions and feedback, nor do I want to, nor do you want me to. Like, the relationship is you do you, right? But whenever I look at these things, like, what can I control? And it's like, honestly, I want to encourage people to continue to get that feedback, but also to learn more about themselves, like understand the emotions that you're feeling and take a hard look at, is this being skewed based off of a honeymoon effect? Or am I just bitter? Am I just angry? And am I not addressing maybe a root issue? Because like one of the things, like if anybody's ever been in a relationship, I always try to discover my fault in the argument as opposed to just having it always be pointing fingers at the other person. Well, the reason I'm mad is because you didn't do this and you didn't do this. It's like, well, maybe, I wasn't responding, in that. Now, sometimes that doesn't necessarily happen in the heat of a moment, but that's usually where it's good to kind of like, all right, let me go take a breather. Like, let's sit down and we talk about this. Like, I know Julie and I recently just had like, an argument. It was like, okay, like I was like, I recognize I've been holding some, like some frustrations that I haven't given you the decency to discuss in a reasonable way. And that came up when like when we ended up having this fight, because, like whenever, like in a relationship, somebody says something and you're like, what? So we ended up having a really great conversation through that, because it's like, let me recognize where I'm falling short. But let me recognize that. But introspection, look at where you are. Don't be mad essentially at, other people, like if they're having the honeymoon or whatnot, but just be like, oh, maybe they're in a honeymoon phase. That comes down also to a review, in any kind of review. I remember when when new Super Mario Brothers came out on the DS, I was so starved for a good 2D Mario game that I consumed that game so hard that it was unhealthy. And at the end of the day, like, I don't think I even really enjoyed it. It's like if all of a sudden you hadn't fed me for 2 weeks and then you brought me to an all-you-can-eat buffet, I ate too much and then I felt sick because I was like, did I really enjoy that experience? No, but it had been so long. Everything, and nothing against the 3D Marios. I love those as well, but I was just so excited to have like oh man, this is a 2D Mario game. We haven't had one of those in so long. And so I overconsumed it. So just kind of learning more about yourself in that regards. And I think essentially I saw like, you get people get the views that, complaining does draw, in the attention on the initial. I don't think it necessarily holds the attention. I think time and time again, like the internet is the internet. And so some people will prejudge a video before they watch it. And then they'll just kind of leave their angry comment because that's what they want to vent. And so typically the people who do it really successfully, they harvest what we were talking about. A couple people like Clean Prince came up. This was a couple years ago, and we were talking about him. And I was like, and you were like, "What's he doing?" And I go, "Well, he's just going out finding the most angry popular opinion on Reddit, and then basically just restates that with some cool visual editing, and his videos do great. And eventually, he just becomes a meme, in that regards. And so he would just do that over and over again, very successfully. He also did it again with his movie channel. Like, the guy clearly understands like algorithm, and what he does is he goes and finds the prevailing interesting and popular opinion that could also have that negative connotation and farms it. I haven't seen his videos in a long time, so I don't know if he's posting gaming and stuff, but that's a reality. And I think the best way that you handle that is you just kind of educate yourself on, how the algorithm and how what the incentives are being applied on various different content creators and onto a specific game.
Yeah, I changed. I haven't watched him in a while.
I haven't seen any of his stuff pop in outside his like nerd Nerdtastic. And I don't even know if he might have sold that because the voice sounds different. So I was like, all right, I didn't care enough to dive in further. So I was like, all right. And then we went from there. So then it says, this is something that I've talked about for years with my friends. I've seen few content creators like Asmongold call them MMORPG nomads. This section of players is essentially go between all the MMOs. They play for 1 to 3 months. The new content releases, get bored and less desire and play. And then they go to another MMO that has been released. Raises a lot of questions of how developers should treat this section of the audience compared to one who may stick around. Does a nomad have more or less to say when it comes to the design of the MMO? What do you think?
I think you cater to both. I think you cater to both. You want to build things for the kind of player that sticks around. That player plays the game differently than a player that's going to be a bit of that Josh Strife Hayes locust, where they're going to come in and consume the crop and move on. But you also want to put something out to draw in those locusts. There are a lot of them, and they're valuable, and it's fun to be in a game when it's new and have that many other people. So if there's only 10 people in your regular group when on a regular basis, that's really fun. I love the mid-cycle stuff in 14 because it feels more intimate. It's just those of us that truly love the game and are sticking around. But it's fun to have all the extra people there on patch day who don't know what's going on, and it's their first time in a long time, and they're excited. And those people might be nomads, and they're welcome for while they're here. They're tourists, and that's great. And so you want to have something for them as well, especially if you talk about it being 1 to 3 month cycles. There's a lot more than 4 MMOs on the market. And so realize that you got to do something for them because there's more than 4 MMOs out there. And so if they're only trying 4 or 5 MMOs in a year, how do you get on that short list?
Yeah.
Because the nomads aren't hitting all of them. They're hitting a section of just how big this genre has gotten. So I think the developers need to try to tackle all levels of players. And that means everything from casual to hardcore, lots of play hours to little play hours, playing regularly throughout the year or just seasonally, play with their friends or play alone. All of these different play styles all deserve a place. We are each our own little weird shaped, those charts that have the different attributes. We're all our own weird shape. I'm really heavily on the solo play, but I'm really want challenging content, or maybe you're more narrative based or whatever. We're all some portion of all of those things. And they're trying to create something that can fit each and every one of our little thumbprints as a player in a big shared space. That's what makes MMOs special. Is they're not truly perfect for any one of us, but they really do a pretty good job of satisfying all of us, even though we're so different.
Now, a Raging Cyclone chimes in and says that they kind of disagree with that. Nomads are transitory and don't allow for somebody to build a budget. Instead, a build for a core audience that is the foundation and grow from that. What do you think about that?
I mean, the core is an incredibly important portion. You can't only receive money once every 2 years. That's a very scary business model. There are seasonal industries out there, and every year you have to crush it or you just go under. So you want a core audience as your basis, but you want to offer that core audience something spectacular with expansions. And that means it costs more than your core audience offers for the maintenance stuff, the patches. And so that is what the nomads pay for, because the nomads absolutely come to town. And yeah, they just come to town for the fair and they leave litter everywhere and it's a mess, but they also bring a big pile of money with them. And so I think it's both. I think you do want that core audience. You need to maintain them, but that core audience on its own, the problem with the core audience is people still fall out of it. They still eventually take a break from that game, or eventually kind of metaphorically, that character eventually kind of dies out. It ages out. And so for some players, maybe playing a game for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years is enough. Some players will play it till it truly goes offline, but there is a bleed rate. And maybe it's that it's the first time you do something wrong, or the 10th time you do something wrong. Maybe it's just they just want something different from games. They've changed as a player, and you didn't as a game, or you changed in different directions. And so the other advantage of all the nomads is those nomads are also capable of being converted. Some people are like, yeah, I used to jump games a lot, and I just keep sticking with this one for some reason. I used to only play it once a year. Now I play it every 6 months, and I think come this expansion, I want to stick around the whole time. And they can replace some of those core gamers, that bleed off.
Yeah. I would kind of say that the nomad, and that's just where really your marketing and your whatever, whether you want to call it seasonal content strategy, comes into play, because it's about making multiple invitations for people to come back and check out your game. So that way you're not just dipping in every other year. That ends up becoming kind of the monetization strategy. And that's why I actually see more and more the move to the battle pass, the season pass kind of model. And my hope is that within the MMOs is that they don't expire, because I think especially with MMOs, they have this mindset of this long-term grind, a much more deeper, sense of investment that you can make into your character. And I think, and if you pair that with more FOMO, I don't think that ends up being healthy. And the other side we see especially with whether you call them settlers or the core gamer, when they generally leave because of how their investment is, it's usually not an amicable split. More often than not, like when I see people complain about a game that I'm talking about and I'm excited about, like Destiny, Final Fantasy back in the day, so many people would come in and they're like, I put 10,000 hours in this game, and it's the worst game ever made. It's like, I put tons of hours into the game, Final Fantasy. I feel like I left on good terms. Like, I love the game, I want it to be a good game, but I've also made my investment, and I feel like it was a good opportunity to move on, as opposed to when I read people's comments, like, I've put in X amount of 1,000 hours and this game sucks. And it's like, I don't think they're relating that kind of critique actually correctly, because clearly there was something that had you in the game for that long. And to say that it sucks would be kind of strange. Like, you'd call out maybe a specific change that you don't appreciate or agree with. That makes more sense in that context. But I think if it's kind of like, I mean, almost you could kind of pivot this question into like, do you just cater to the hardcore or the casual, like within that regards? And I always say, like, there's a symbiotic relationship that these two groups have in common. And it's that they both need each other. You need the hardcore to kind of inspire and to give aspirational content that the casual player would see and say, oh man, that looks really interesting. That fight looks really interesting. I want to find out how I can do that. And the answer is going to be invest more time into the game. The hardcore player needs the casual player, because it's not like you have one core player and 3 nomads. It's like you have one core player, to 1,000 of the nomads. And so, like, the nomads are what are funding the game. They're the ones who are spending in that money and taking those breaks and still yet spending the money. And that's where it ends up becoming, and who knows, it could be even more than 1,001. Like, it's the numbers themselves are, especially when you just go look at clear rates of Savage content at 14 and even Ultimate, or even the numbers that actually hit level cap. Like, it's hitting level cap is actually like, welcome to the hardcore. Like, it's like, it is a bigger feat, and let alone than people who do that multiple times and on multiple characters. So you get niched down really, really quickly, and the lines start to blur really, really quickly. And I think as long as you're having fun with the game, that's good. Now, here's the real kicker. Like, when it comes to feedback, right? Because not all feedback is equal. One of the things that's actually very difficult to do on social media is determine authority and to determine, like, is this valid feedback? Because that's where you categorize feedback in two ways. Are you hearing and are you listening? Like, we're hearing you, but we're really not listening to what you have to say, versus like listening implies, in my mind, an understanding of the core issue. And the answer could very well be no, because gamers will optimize the fun out of everything. And if you end up just listening to an overwhelming majority of people who say, can't you just put autoplay in this game? Because that would be really great for me. Oh, that kind of really does overall hurt the vision for the game. But you have to kind of take that feedback in and quantify it. And they have people whose full-time job is to do that, is to also look into it. Like, what kind of player is this player? What kind of feedback is that? And then, do we agree with that kind of feedback for our vision for the game itself? And everything kind of goes through these filters, gets categorized, and then gets prioritized. And the answer very well might be, and might need to be, no. But that's always going to be that ebb and flow, because, like, in Yoshi P's case for 14, he says he wants to make the game that the vast majority of the community wants, and then he asks, like, do you want free to play? And the vast majority say no. So it's like, cool, we're good. But if everybody was saying that, I think that's where you see it. And so I do think that feedback is automatically weighted. I don't think that the average viewer, like in our case, or the Reddit poster, the commenter, has that same feeling. They feel like a streamer might outweigh, gamer feedback. And I don't think that's the case either. But, their streaming is more in the form of marketing than it is an actual, like, them, like, legitimately saying, "Oh, we Asmon wanted a great sword in New World, so we put that as the priority over anything else." I don't think that's actually how that worked out. What do you think, Chris?
I mean, I think the other thing about feedback is to keep in mind that, as you start to look at things like that, where they're doing it to cater to this particular set of players or something like that, how are they stating their opinion? How is it coming across?
Mm.
When you just say make the game good, that's not really actionable. Stop making bad content. That's not really actionable. So
Yeah.
the group that does a really good job making their opinion both heard and understood also has a higher chance of seeing some semblance of it changing. So you also have people that start to have really good kind of shepherds of that, going on to forums or posting YouTube videos or to Twitter or wherever it is. You don't have to be a content creator, but there are people that do a really good job of taking that view and going and having the metaphorical equivalent of signatures, having universal support from a group, from an audience, but also taking the time to, you see in 14, there have been raiders that have taken the time to put big, beautiful posts over on the forums that have gotten a lot of shares and likes and all that. And it's like, okay, so I can see a lot of people agree with what this person is saying. And this person has taken the time to talk about, here are some areas on what's going right. Here's some areas that are what's going poorly. And here's what I think is causing that and the trend that I think could move us in a better direction. I'm not telling you, if you don't do this, I'll quit. Like, I'm not holding the devs hostage. I'm just saying, like, these are the sorts of things to put in there. And then they say, okay, we have a general ability to steer the ship. Yes, let's factor that in. Let's steer the ship slightly left. Yoshi P has actually talked about with Final Fantasy 14 development that, I put in, we have system A and system B in the development, and we decided to go with system A. And then universally, players without even knowing about system B say, man, I wish they'd done system B. And we're like, crap. But we're already in the process of putting system 2A in the game versus 2B in the game. Mm-hmm. And we can't just rip the cord off and then go put 2B in the game. That doesn't make any sense. So what we really end up doing is doing a 2A with a couple elements from B, and we begin steering the ship in that way. And so over several patches, we can keep steering. So that continued feedback that's filled with clarity and thoughtfulness and understanding and a little bit of patience tends to actually be what gets more response, assuming that they have the methods in place to listen, which comes down to like community managers and all these things that are really hard jobs. They're very hard jobs, and they don't tend to be the most glorious. They tend to be like, when I see layoffs, they for some reason always seem to be some of the first to go.
Right.
And yet without them, like now, even if you put a really coherent argument out there, who's receiving it on the other end?
Very, very, very true. Well, guys, that wraps us up for the discussion and the conversation. I think those are some really interesting questions, and Reddit thread was really interesting to see. I feel like it's kind of like what we've been saying. It seems to be at least more and more people recognizing that within the genre and how it kind of has these seasons and ebbs and flows. And I hear the counter argument: people don't want that seasonal model, but it's essentially what is ultimately right now working, and maybe that will change. Like, I think when we were talking about it in Discord, looking at what future technologies and things like that can bring into the space, like with AI, quantum computing, and things like that. Like, if you were going to say, like, when should Square Enix, what target should Square Enix set for the next, if they're going to make another Final Fantasy MMO? And I think when we were kind of like saying, like, kind of spec for PlayStation 6, because it's going to take you that long to make an MMO. These are the technologies that are, delving. And then when you start to think about it, like, you could actually have an MMO that really hits a next gen, something that cannot be done today, but soon will or might be able to. And some of those technologies like cloud computing and things like that have already, come and are starting to be taken advantage of by the current modern MMO, like something like New World. And we'll have to see how that kind of plays out over the course of the next, decade plus, because there's some really cool things being developed. When we start talking about Chat GPT and what have you, like, the AI could have a really interesting impact into immersion into MMOs. And so it's going to be something that we'll see how that evolves over the course of the next several years. So it should be pretty exciting regardless. Now, of course, you got anything you want to share or anything you want to promote before we wrap up today's show?
No, I'm about to take a little bit of a breather and go get some food and then come back and watch some Ultimate Prog in 14. So nothing big. Should be a good week. A little more Guild Wars, a little more New World this week. Lots of streams, and then I will be off all of next week and the following Monday. So nothing big. We have lots of things pre-recorded, so hopefully the gaming kind of side of thing just keeps chugging. And yeah, it's a good time to be a gamer.
Absolutely. I'll be giving you guys my impressions here for the Forspoken PC version as soon as I have them, and we'll be looking forward to some fun stuff to be had in February. Maybe we'll get that Witch Queen raid down in Destiny and whatnot. So, all right, guys, I'm gonna hit end broadcast over here on the YouTube side. Thanks so much for hanging out. We can go hang out on Twitch if you want. Otherwise, we'll be back on Friday, and then, like Chris said, we'll no live shows next week as he is on vacation. So we'll have the videos set to roll out. So. We'll see you on Friday here on YouTube. But otherwise, y'all have a great one. And it's just going to spin.